The Rise of Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince. Bradley Hope and Justin Sheck start their book, Blood and Oil, Mohammed bin Salman's Ruthless Quest for Global Power, with the epigraph, "Seize opportunities, for they pass like clouds," quoting the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, Ali ibn Ali Talib. The quote succinctly encapsulating the character of Mohammed bin Salman, colloquially known as MBS, and his time as Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince. It articulates how MBS has commandeered political situations effectively for his own personal gain, this resulting in his total control over his father's kingdom. MBS is a young and ambitious man with plenty of energy. In his tenure, he has not been afraid to disrupt the balance of power. He's declared war in Yemen, led a boycott of Qatar over its support for the Muslim Brotherhood and its state sponsorship of the news outlet Al Jazeera, and been unafraid to use brutal tactics domestically to consolidate immense power within the Al Saud family. The war in Yemen, MBS as Defence Minister. In January 2015, MBS was appointed Defence Minister. Very quickly, he made his presence felt by getting the kingdom involved in a military conflict in Yemen, which has resulted, according to UNICEF, in the world's worst humanitarian crisis. MBS attempted to convince the USA, his generals, and King Salman that the campaign would be a quick win against Houthi rebels in Yemen. Operation Decision Storm, as the initial air campaign was named, was really the start of a new proxy war between the kingdom and Iran. For MBS, the operation was an opportunity to showcase that a new Saudi Arabia was not afraid to get stuck into aggressive foreign policy decisions, even if the kingdom did not necessarily have the initial backing of the American State Department. MBS was very calculated to use the initial outbreak of Saudi involvement in Yemen as a PR opportunity to establish himself as an important and upcoming figure within the kingdom. In a show of strength, MBS made sure that within hours of the first attacks, the Saudi government distributed photos of him with a resolute expression, studying maps and consulting with military leaders. From his reading of history, Mohammed came to see the world in terms of confrontation and demonstrated this in the arena of foreign policy. He chafed at the idea that a power like the United States could exert control over Saudi Arabia in a way that harkened back to a bygone colonial era. The Sheikhdown, the Ritz, Carlton Coup. On the 4th of December 2017, MBS ordered some 200 wealthy businessmen and princes to be placed under house arrest in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Over 40 princes and government ministers, at the behest of the Crown Prince, on corruption and money laundering charges, as well as the head of the Saudi National Guard and the Saudi prince and billionaire Al-Walid bin Talal, were arrested, interrogated, and in some cases rumoured to be tortured. Under the guise of anti-corruption, MBS used the coup to recalibrate the distribution of power within the kingdom. No longer were the three main families going to divide up the three branches of Saudi Arabia's armed forces, the Ministry of Defence, the Interior Ministry, and the National Guard, amongst themselves. Instead, MBS was going to ensure that all three branches of the military owed and devoted their personal loyalty to him, and in turn to his father, King Salman. Whilst Western observers saw the arrests as a blatant power grab and abuse of the rule of law, locally many championed the move. For decades, Saudis had put up with lofty princes and well-connected businessmen always getting their way, as nepotism reigned supreme. Now it seemed many of these elites were being cut down to size, and this perception sent a shudder of pleasure through nearly everyone but the top 5% of the country. MBS's economic reforms, Vision 2030. With his newly consolidated power, Mohammed had a clear vision of how he wanted to radically restructure Saudi Arabia's economy. His youth and dynamism was something fresh compared to the inertia that had plagued previous crown princes and family members in charge of the kingdom's immense oil wealth. MBS was the inverse of his uncles before him, the former kings who derived power from a royal consensus and who tended towards extreme conservatism for fear of imperiling the dynasty. They had been desiccated old men by the time they took power, without the courage or energy to make big changes. MBS was the complete opposite. MBS was determined to divert the kingdom's dependence away from oil and towards other industries. He was under the impression that as long as Saudi Arabia pumped and sold oil as its main source of revenue, it would be captive to the old economy that lived and died on petroleum products. He felt sure that this era was in decline, and his reforms were about shifting the economy to more sustainable sources of income. His ambition to sell part of Aramco, the state-owned petroleum and natural gas company, was a huge departure from the old Saudi way, and only the first step in Mohammed's strategy to move away from oil, diversify the kingdom's economy, and create new jobs and social freedom for its burgeoning youth population. That was the theory, at least. The assassination of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Whilst MBS marketed himself as Saudi Arabia's reformist, seen in the expelling of religious police off the streets, giving Saudi women the freedom to drive, liberalising the Saudi economy, and gradually opening up the kingdom to tourism, at the same time, a sinister and gross authoritarianism against dissent was emerging under MBS. Mohammed wanted to show its subjects that they had a simple choice: get on board and enjoy the music and restaurants, where men and women could mix in normal fashion, like in Dubai or Bahrain, or keep complaining in a newspaper column or on online spaces and get thrown in jail, or worse. Jamal Khashoggi was a veteran Saudi journalist and former Saudi government official with more than 1 million Twitter followers. In the beginning, he was supportive of the direction MBS was taking the country. This reflected in his initial support and defence of Operation Decisive Storm. He stated in 2015 that it was important to signal that Saudi Arabia would not tolerate Iran's efforts to control the region, and he also seemed enthusiastic about Mohammed's economic and social reforms. Mostly in his capacity as a writer, Khashoggi delighted in the power of ideas. In this role, Khashoggi would sometimes stray from the royal court, pushing the envelope on sensitive topics. During the Arab Spring, which terrified Saudi Arabia's monarchy, he started attending regional conferences about governance in the Middle East, talking with people who openly regarded the Al Saud as enemies. Whilst Khashoggi hoped for a more democratic Middle East, this did not have to mean an end to the Al Saud leadership. However, Mohammed did not appreciate this nuance. His view was binary. Khashoggi could be a friend or an enemy. On the 2nd of October 2018, Khashoggi was first tortured and then murdered in a Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, by 15 members of MBS's personal bodyguard. The nature of the murder was later confirmed by Turkish and US intelligence services. Mohammed denied any involvement in the murder and blamed the assassination on road operators. In a conversation with a Saudi contact after the killing, Mohammed lamented the damage it was causing to his reputation with Western leaders. "Now they think I'm a journalist killer," he sputtered in frustration. However, overall, MBS does not regret ordering the death of one of Saudi Arabia's most famous journalists. He has actually doubled down. He isn't sorrowful. The opposite. He's confident his actions against Khashoggi have ensured future dissidents keep their heads down. Also, MBS is bound to be happy that the Americans have not reacted as strongly as they could have done. This month, US President Joe Biden defended the decision not to impose any sanctions on MBS for his involvement in Khashoggi's death, in a move that rights groups argue signals permanent impunity for the kingdom. Looking ahead, we will wait and see where MBS takes the kingdom in the years to come. But what is clear is that MBS has secured his position as the de facto leader of his country for the years ahead. And when his father, King Salman, dies, his place as ruler of the kingdom. It is striking what MBS has done inside and outside of the kingdom in his few short years as defense minister and then as crown prince. He has many years to prove his vision. He isn't even king yet. To truly comprehend what his legacy may be, observers will have to give the young MBS time. His legacy may come in 10, 20, even 30 years, as the ascension of MBS has only just begun.